All right. We should be recording now and we can begin the meeting. I do have something that I need to read to everyone since we are beginning the meeting. In 1 second to pull that up. Please clearly state and spell your full name. If you are representing an organization, please clearly state the name of the organization you are representing. You will have only 3 minutes to speak. The timer will start after you have started your name and, if applicable, the name of your organization that you are representing. A 30-second warning will be given. At the end of the 3 minutes, you will be given a signal to stop. Once the signal is given, you may complete your sentence and then you must stop. TEA staff will not be responding to your comments today, nor will TEA staff ask or answer any questions. The meeting can begin. All right, the first person on our list speaking is Elizabeth Wilson.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Wilson, ELIZABETHWILSON. I'm one of the kitchen table moms, and we work with a coalition of dyslexia groups across the state of Texas that represent around 50,000 families. To begin, I wanted to thank the TEA for adding the full definition of SLD to the TAC codes. Dyslexia is recognized in IDEA as one of the SLD disabilities. Addressing this in the TAC codes will be helpful in bringing clarity to districts that mistakenly think that dyslexia is not a disability recognized under IDEA and choose to serve it as gen ed or a related service. My only suggestion would be to add to the definition and related disorders, as already mentioned by Stephen Aleman from Disability Rights Texas. I would also like to address section C and the wording prior to. Prior to is in a different, is not in IDEA and is currently, hold on, I'm gonna say this, prior to is in a different section of IDEA. Something just got messed up here. I would like to suggest that it gets removed. Adding prior to gives districts the wiggle room to kick the can down the road and delay the full and individual evaluation mandated by IDEA when a disability is suspected. For example, if allowed, our district used to use Take Flight and RTI as general education interventions prior to offering the full evaluation. For my child not doing the FIE first, they didn't know how the typical presentation of Take Flight would not work for her, but they refused to consider anything else until she did it for 2 years. That is delaying an FIE related to SLD and delaying individualized reading intervention by requiring that she complete 2 years of a standardized approach first. So to be clear, I would like to remove prior to. I would also like to suggest some language from Texas Parents Guide to ARD that I think would be helpful. The verbiage would be students who are struggling in the general classroom are not required to first participate in support services prior to referral for a special education evaluation under IDEA. Thank you, and I will send this to you in an email as well.
Yes, thank you for sending that to us in an email.
Thank you.
The next person on our list speaking is Heidi Goldman. Just a reminder, if you could spell your first and last name and state the organization that you're with when you begin.
My name is Heidi Goldman, HEIDI-GOLDMAN. In December 2020, I actually filed a complaint with the TEA regarding 19 TAC 891040 related to eligibility determinations for specific learning disabilities. I'm in Round Rock ISD, and they continue to state, and I quote this from language included in a FIE written this month, that when determining the presence of a specific learning disability, state and federal guidelines mandate local education agencies examine cognitive and academic assessments results, compare them to one another to determine if there's a pattern of strengths and weaknesses. A student can demonstrate a SPED learning disability and show characteristics of dyslexia dysgraphia. However, a student who has characteristics of dyslexia dysgraphia isn't necessarily a student with a special education learning disability if no weakness exists in their cognitive abilities. The response from TEA said that's consistent with 19 TAC and that they did not investigate. So TEA has allowed my district to ignore current TAC section 9B1, which says if student does not make significant progress in RTI, then they can qualify for an SLD. And that's what happened to my son and continues to happen today, is that students not making progress in a 504 dyslexia program are told, sorry, this is all we have because you don't show a deficit on a cross battery assessment. Even though he showed he had short-term memory deficit, that wasn't enough to remove him from his failing program. So with the new TAC document revisions, section 9B3, does the language need to include one that either one, failure of RTI, or two, pattern of strengths and weaknesses are absolutely required to be determined a student with a specific learning disability? Can this section be edited to not be a requirement? It's confusing for parents in the district because one, we know, as was just stated, RTI goes against, we can't use that to delay or deny an evaluation. And then two, TEA put out a FAQ in January about on page 3, which says, must the evaluation of a student referred for a specific learning disability include a cognitive processes, strengths, and weaknesses test? Eligibility criteria for an SLD does not include a requirement for testing cognitive processes and weaknesses. The U.S. Department of Education says the department does not believe that an assessment of psychological or cognitive processing should be required. So I'm thankful to see in the revision of section B32, you have added language from federal law,
30
which
seconds.
PSW must be determined to be relevant. I'm just unsure with districts like Round Rock, which have difficulty changing course to update procedure, if this will be enough to stop the current practice, which is systematically denying SLD eligibility for students with dyslexia dysgraphia, unless they can prove to have a weakness that may not even be related to their current needs or limitations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please feel free to add that, to send that to us in an email as well. Next speaking is Stephanie Virag.
Hi, good morning. My name is Stephanie Virag. It's Stephanie. Virag, V as a Victor, IRAG. I'm representing myself and my family. Thank you for the edits to the TAC code. Thank you for adding IDEA language as a first step to align Texas dyslexia SLD laws with federal IDEA laws. Section 9B2, language is added to consider using in-class tests, grade average over time, norm, or certain reference tests, and statewide assessments to determine if an SLD is present. Please strike this statement or add initial to so the school does not skew the data after retakes and accommodations. This happened to my daughter, who would not be given an SLD identification because they did retest, and they, after so many, she had the grades to be able to be denied that. This violates federal law and delays identification. Section 9C, same issue as 9B2, bringing data after several attempts or accommodated data into the mix. This will give school districts a loophole and deny any SLD identification, which violates IDEA. Add unaccommodated initial attempts or on in-class tests, etc. And then in 9D, On that section, it would delay evaluation if over the summer or if school building is closed. Please add virtual observation if school is closed as to not delay the evaluation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaking is Amy Traynor.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Amy Traynor, AMYTRAYNOR. I'm representing myself and my family. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. I'll also be sending in a written comment. I'm concerned that the proposed changes continue to leave the door open for varied interpretation and confusion regarding the eligibility criteria for SLD, which has historically been the case, which has caused harm to Texas students and led to the continued corrective action from OSEP that we're going through right now. I would like to comment regarding the eligibility definitions on 89-1040 C9B 2I, specific to the language starting with such as in-class test averages over time, for example, 6 weeks or semester, norm or criterion reference tests, and statewide assessments. While that is a nice description of the multiple sources of data able to be considered, I would like to suggest the addition of the words initial attempts on before starting with in class. And then following the 8 areas of possible eligibility, add if accommodations are utilized on any measure, the impact of the accommodation on the student's performance must be considered to ensure an accurate representation of the presence of a disability. My reasoning in requesting this, for example, if a student has been receiving 504 support or other areas of support, it is highly likely that the grades that are collected through this consideration process have been accommodated, and that accommodated grade is reflected in the data. And while the accommodation does level the playing field for the student with disability, the accommodation does not provide an accurate representation of the presence of a disability. Likewise, data could also be limited to collecting the initial attempts. Since many students are given multiple opportunities to pass a test as an accommodation, using initial attempts would be more, would validate the presence of a disability rather than the multiple attempts. Considering that a student may have passed a test without considering the multiple attempts that they may have made doesn't provide an accurate representation of the data, of the disability in the data. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. See, the next speaker is Nyla.
Good morning. My name is Nylam Agrawal, spelled as N as in Nancy, I-L-A-M, Agrawal, A-G-R-A-W-A-L. I'm representing myself and my family. And today I am speaking on the proposed Texas Education Code 28.025 34 CFR 300.309 and the proposed changes in the eligibility criteria for specific learning disability and deafblind education. I'm a mother of 2 smart and hardworking kids in mainstream education who are also deafblind. Our experience has shown that people do not really have very high academic expectations from children who are deafblind. They also have predetermined biases on specific learning disabilities and dyslexia when it comes to deafblind population. My daughter has struggled to get the dyslexia qualification from her school district. The current eligibility criteria has failed to clearly define that a child who is deaf, blind, or deafblind can also have dyslexia. The proposed amendment has left it ambiguous by using the word primarily not caused by hearing or vision loss. When interpreted at school district level, it means there are hundreds of students like my 11-year-old daughter Krishangi, who will be giving a testimony today, who will be falsely denying. They use the Texas Dyslexia Handbook to say that children who have existing hearing and vision condition cannot have dyslexia. This is not true. Research shows that blind children with no vision and who are tactile learners of Braille can also have dyslexia. Research shows that dyslexia is a reading disorder and not a hearing and vision disorder. My family request is that please state specifically that deafblind children can have dyslexia. Early identification and remediation is very critical. And please state that define that vision and hearing accommodations for specific learning disability testing must be given for evaluation for these children. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rebecca Holmes.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Rebecca Holmes, spelled Rebecca Holmes, and I'm part of the Kitchen Table Parent Group. I'm speaking today just personally on my own and for my family. And I, just want to thank the TEA for revising the part of the education code related to specific learning disability and for including the IDEA language, which includes dyslexia. I think this is helpful because we have heard for many years that in Texas, dyslexia is not a learning disability. And OSEP cites that specifically in their most recent October 2020 letter. So hopefully adding this language will go a long way towards ending some of the ambiguity there. So I'm glad that it's updated. I'm going to speak to a couple of the things that others have spoken to related to some of the criteria mentioned in section B2 and C2. When it gets into the multiple measures that can be considered, such as in-class tests, grade averages, repeated assessments. And we were impacted by this like many others because those measures were used to invalidate the testing that was done that showed an SLD. So in our case, we met SLD criteria, but because of grades that were accommodated and included retests, and because of STAR tests that also were heavily accommodated, we were told there was no educational need and denied eligibility. And so I think it would be important to include some language to consider the reality that most kids who are being tested for an SLD are already on a 504 plan and receiving accommodations. So a lot of those other measures, the results of them are accommodated. And in a lot of scenarios, schools provide retesting for students to raise their grade point averages. There's specific Texas education code that encourages high schools, and Texas education code 28.0216 encourages high schools to provide opportunities for students to retake to meet the passing standard. And even in our intermediate school from 5th through 8th grade, which is common across the state, students have an opportunity to retest on any quiz or test up to an 85. And so what that looked like for us was when it was time to consider eligibility, our school said, you have a student with a strong B average who passed the STAR test, so we are not concerned that their formal testing shows SLD eligibility. And all of our attempts to show that those strong B grades would really be failing grades without the retakes, our school was not willing to engage in that conversation, and they were not willing to consider the support and accommodations that were part of all of those measures. And so I think adding clarification and language to say that schools must consider what the initial attempts look like and must consider how accommodations are allowing a student to achieve those scores needs to be added in, because no parent wants to create a situation where their child must fail in those areas in order to be eligible for an SLD qualification. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, our next speaker is Aryan Shroff.
It's me, and my name is Krish Shroff, Krish, and I'm speaking from my heart. Deafblind people do have dyslexia, and I was in Plano ISD, and they would never give me dyslexia qualifications because I know sort of blind, and that reason is because the law says that deafblind people cannot have dyslexia, which is wrong. I wanted to say that deafblind people can have dyslexia. That's why we need to give them the services they need. We need to help them. We have to give them the proper services. And not only that, in my FIE report, they wrote that I do have encoding disabilities, but they believe it's all because of my hearing and vision. And hearing and vision does not have anything to do with it. It's because they have not taught me. And when I was younger, I was reading at first grade level. Last year, I was reading first grade level. This year, I'm reading fourth grade level because my mom has taught me how to read and write. Not only that, she bought me a private tutor. So I worked with both of them, and now I can read at fourth grade level. I don't like how the law discriminates the deafblind people just because of their disabilities. People with disabilities can have dyslexia. Thank you.
Thank you, Krish. I encourage you to submit your comments in writing through email to TEA.
And what address should we send that to?
Can you repeat that again?
Let's see. I'm trying. Does anybody know the email address off so that they can put it in the chat? Because I don't recall it. And I don't have it right in front of me. I'm sure somebody here knows it. Oh, just right off the top of their head. If not, stay on when we're done, Krish, and I will get the email for you, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yes. All right. Some person in chat, and I can't see the name because of how my chat is, said that they got dropped and would like to speak.
That was me.
Lisa, okay, yes, I have you still on the list. I just said that you left, but I will remove that and put speaking. And if you will be sure to, I don't know if you heard the beginning, if you would be sure to spell your first and last name when you begin.
Of course. Is it my turn? Am I up?
You're up.
All right. My name is Lisa Flores, Lisa. Last name Flores, Flores. I'm representing myself and my family, and I would like to give information about the eligibility criteria for specific learning disability. My first point is in section A. There's many disabilities that are served in self-contained settings that are not part of the exemptions for SLD. And it ties into sort of section BII in that part of the criteria is looking at grade level curriculum. For very frequently, students served in self-contained settings are served in a setting where K through 5 are served in the same room. So grade appropriate curriculum becomes more difficult as there are many grade levels in one classroom. So it's very difficult for individual students to get their grade level needs met by one teacher in a self-contained setting. That doesn't negate the presence of an SLD, but the question of appropriate instruction comes into play. Is it appropriate if you are getting the same instruction across 6 grade levels as other peers? Because that is de facto what happens in classrooms. Very infrequently are teachers giving, separate lessons to the students that are there that may be eligible for SLD, but are served in a self-contained setting. So that access to appropriate instruction becomes debatable. Also in section B, grades are very subjective. I can only speak from my student's experience, but he is very rarely graded on actual acquisition of concepts, but more frequently graded on presence in the classroom or effort, and it varies from teacher to teacher. So I don't feel like grades are really an accurate measure of a student's actual acquisition of the areas in question when it comes to SLD. For math or for reading, to be honest, because they're subjective. Under section E, I would like for it to be clarified that any participant in the committee has minimally passed the HB3 reading academies to be able to serve in that committee, or minimally knows the science of reading if the student in question has an SLD related to reading. And I just wanted to say that a lot of the additional sort of requirements to identify SLD to me are de facto barriers for that student to really access the specialized instruction they need. And I feel like it's going to result in metering out quality literacy and math supports that is unnecessary. No student will be harmed by being identified and getting the supports and services they need. Thank you. I just wanted to give the perspective from a student already identified with special education. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe everybody that signed up has had a chance to speak.
There's jessamyn.
Oh, I'm sorry, the one that wanted to go last. They even have you highlighted. Thank you for reminding me.
That's okay. I think we should have ended with Lisa. She does, I mean, everybody did such a great job, but I still like to speak too.
Yes, please do.
Okay, my name is Jessamyn Putnam. That's spelled Jessamyn, Putnam, Putnam. I'm representing myself and my family, and we are both in the public school and I homeschool as well. So I'm super excited. Thank you so much for this opportunity to hear from the people that these laws are going to impact. And as so many in this group, I'd like to draw your attention to the section 9B2 and C2, the specific learning disabilities. As with so many, I'm concerned with the way this is worded because I believe this is going to be used to deny dyslexic students an SLD designation, especially those in early elementary and outside the public school system that will still have a right to an evaluation and to this designation. So if B2 isn't struck out as was requested by Stephanie, then perhaps adding not limited to after such as, and to include after state assessments and or national, and also to include examples of work product and parent provided data. And why is this? And this is, as so many have said, this is subjective, what y'all are requesting. We think that it is data that is not subjective, but it is. Grades. My son made a 16 on a test, my older middle school kid, and he took 5 retakes until he got an 82. And at the end of the year, there was a huge email push to the parents and the students saying, retake all the tests and all the work assignments that you need to retake to get your grades up. So absolutely, this is a fact. When COVID hit last year and my early elementary son that I hadn't started homeschooling yet came home, he had on his report card, he had decent grades, but I started to see that he was struggling, and I was reporting all of this to the school, and he wasn't doing well with his letters and his numbers. He wasn't at what his report card was showing. And when they gave his final report card, they had actually inflated his grade by a letter grade when he should have actually been a letter grade below. And this prevented us, or was a roadblock in me getting a full and complete evaluation under IDEA for dyslexia, because they said, look, his grades are great. And I said, well, I showed his work product. And I said, no, his grades are false. They're erroneous. His work is terrible. He needs to be evaluated. We were denied initially, and based on those false inflated grades. So grades are absolutely subjective, and they're inflated. They do not realistically show what's going on. And that also goes to accommodations, what was already said. If we're taking tests or we're in the classroom doing retakes or everything else, we have to set out, were these grades that were accomplished via accommodations or not? So absolutely, some of the things that Stephanie and Amy Traynor said, is this an initial attempt on tests, and pointing out if accommodations were used or not, because otherwise this criteria that's currently in this suggested wording is going to be used to deny students who would otherwise meet the criteria of an SLD. I also agree too with what was stated earlier in the 9D to add a virtual evaluation. It's not just for summer, but again, think of us who are homeschooling, or think of those in the private school, and the fact that sometimes you can't physically go, but you can always access people virtually. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jessamyn. Thank you, everyone who is here. I am posting in the chat. This is where the video from today that is being recorded and the video from Tuesday, they will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. I do not know the exact date that they will be uploaded because I have to submit them for review. But they will be uploaded. So if you watch the channel, check in periodically in the next few days, you will discover them there. If you want to watch them or somebody else wants to watch them. I am trying to stop the recording.
Ms. Bowman?
Yes.
Okay, so this is my first time giving a testimony, and when I was speaking, I heard kind of a buzzer in the back, and I thought that was for my time up. Do you think I can get a few extra minutes to finish what I had to say?
We only give 3 minutes to everyone.
Okay, so, all right. Is it possible for me to also send my testimony, the entire thing that I had written to you?
Yes, I believe somebody did post the email address in the chat. I'm going to be here for just a few minutes so that everybody has a chance to get whatever they need out of the chat. And you can submit, anybody here can submit their testimony to us via email.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you.